Aloha mai kako. Mahalo for joining us and welcome. I'd like to start tonight with an oli velina manoa. Velina manoa I ka lehua aloha, aloha ua tua ine. Mailua hine ai waikiki, Kiaʻi ke kahau kani. Kanino na leo e o kamaina aina aloha e manoai. Aloha. Aloha and welcome to the final seminar of our seminar series this semester, Sciences and the Sacred, Indigenous Data Sovereignty. We are so excited to have such wonderful speakers with us tonight. And to get started, I'm going to ask our kako'o Katie if you can please start our slideshow. Mahalo. So for this final seminar, we're going to be doing Kiaʻi ʻIke. So Kiaʻi means guardian and ʻIke means knowledge, and we'll be talking about knowledge stewardship practices. So we started this seminar series by looking to our cousins on the continent and in Aotearoa, and we're going to end tonight by really highlighting some examples of how we are doing knowledge stewardship, data sovereignty, knowledge sovereignty here in Hawaii today. So we would like to thank, this series would not be possible without our funders and supporters. So this series is brought to you by the University of Hawaii at Manoa Seed Ideas Initiative. We'd also like to support our partners in this, the Biocultural Initiative of the Pacific. And our team, our support team tonight is from the Hawaii Sea Grant College Program, the Ulana ʻIke Center of Excellence. I also want to just recognize our tech kako'o tonight, Katie and Sara. So mahalo to them. I'd also like to recognize this beautiful art that we have by Ka'ulumaika. It is actually freely available as long as you provide credit. And so we want to credit our Indigenous artists for providing these beautiful images that you'll see on the slides tonight. Next. So the theme of tonight really is, what are community-centered approaches to safeguarding our knowledge and data relations? And we're calling them data relations because actually one of the kumu who started tonight reminded us of this spectrum that we started this seminar series on. On one side, we have researchers coming into a community and doing research on us without any consultation. And on the other side, we have, the idea of no research about us without us. And in fact, that it's these things that we call data are our relatives. They are pieces of our aina, of our knowledge. And so it is appropriate that we kind of end and bookend this series by thinking about what are the ways that we in Hawaii have actually been proactive and thinking about that. And we're going to talk about two tonight. One, we're going to review, but another, we're going to actually talk about the process. And we're so lucky to have Dr. Daviana Pomaikai McGregor to join us in moderating the conversation. So I'd like to start by introducing our speakers tonight. So our first speaker is Kumu Hokulani Holt Padilla. Kumu Hokulani is a master hula teacher who first studied with her grandmother, Ida Pakulani Long, and later learned from her aunt, Kahili Cummings, and mother Leana Woodside, and Huakale Kama'u. She has been the Kumu Hula of Pa'ua Hi'iaka, the halau she founded in 1976 for over 35 years. She was a founding member, a parent, and director for Punana Leo o Maui, Hawaiian Language Preschool. She directs Kahikino Kala, a Hawaiian student scholarship program at UH Maui College, and she works with nonprofits Kauahea Inc. and Lalakea Foundation, teaching community culture classes and overseeing the culture education centers in Waihe'e and Wai'ehu, Maui. Auntie Hokulani has devoted her professional and personal life to teaching, promoting, and supporting Hawaiian culture. So welcome and mahalo. We are so lucky also to have Kumuhula Tatiana Sue Fox. She is from Honouliuli, Ewa Oahu, and she's the middle daughter of Kumuhula Iwalani Sue and has continued their family legacy as the Kumuhula of Nale o Ka'iwa Ha'ai Kalani. She has worked for Kamehameha Schools for 20 years and served in various roles from teacher to administrator, and she's currently a senior project manager of the Kamehameha Schools OEB Leadership Institute. Tatiana is a passionate educator, cultural practitioner, and devoted wife and mother who is inspired by tradition and ignited by innovation. So we're so thankful to also have Kumu Fox with us tonight. And our final panelist is Kumu Kodi Poyopata. Kumu Kodi Poyopata has been the Kumu Hula of Hala Hula Okamala Mamahilani, which spans Maui, Oahu, and Japan since its inception in January 2003. His formal iniki rites were administered to him in September 2001 by Kumu Hula Nona Mahilani, Kaluhio Kalani, and Loea Kula Uncle George Naope. He went additional intensive trainings under Kumu Hula Keala Kukona and Kumu Hula JJ Ahulau Akiona, and Loea Hilda Kiana Aina. And he now serves as the cultural advisor to the mayor of the city and county of Honolulu. So mahalo. If we were together, as I have said in the previous seminar, I would be giving you real lei. In place of that, though, I want to give you some digital lei over the internet. So I offer a second oli to you all. Ke inu maila na hala o na we ke kai no na we kala no puna kawahinge no talua no idila we. So mahalo and welcome to all of you. And now I turn things over to Professor Daviana McGregor. And full disclosure, she is my mom. Dr. Daviana McGregor is a professor of ethnic studies and the founder of the ethnic studies department. And she is also the director for the Center for Oral History and also a member of the Biocultural Center of the Pacific. So I would like to turn over to Mom, handing the baton over, and mahalo.
Aloha kako, so nice to have everyone joining us. I just know my cousin is here too and listening, so I'm really happy. Aloha Pili. I think we want to thank all the panelists. Maybe could we have everybody so we could have a panel discussion? I want to start off with the question of the evening. Oh, just want to clarify that Kumu Pata is the advisor to the mayor of Maui County. I think she said Honolulu by mistake. And it's Tatiana Seo Fox. So could we start off at any order you want, but maybe we'll start with Hokulani and then go to Tatiana and then Pueo. From your perspective, what is ʻIke Hawaii? And what examples have you seen of misuse or misappropriation of our ʻIke Hawaii?
Yeah, mahalo. And I would like to thank all of you for inviting us here today and for our opportunity to share what we have been doing recently with Huamakahikina. So, ʻIke Hawaii is all those things that ʻIke is, number one, which is everything you can know, feel, experience, incorporate into what you do. And ʻIke Hawaii means those are Hawaiian things that you know and feel and experience and incorporate into what you do. So ʻIke Hawaii, I believe, see, we each have a little bit of a little own way, so we're just gonna mix. Yeah, I don't know if we're gonna go one by one. We just gonna mix. And so one of the things I like to talk about with ʻIke Hawaii is ʻIke Hawaii, number one, belongs to Hawaiians. And ʻIke Hawaii are those things that have come into contemporary modern times since the beginning of Hawaiian time. And because of that, it belongs to Hawaiians. And therefore it is Hawaiians who should disseminate, distribute, share, those things that make our culture unique and special throughout the world. I'm always amazed by, okay, and sometimes we say weird things and I'm just gonna go for it. Sometimes I'm amazed at why non-Hawaiians are so enamored with mea Hawaii. You know, what is it that Hawaii and our kupuna has and know and share that draws people to it, people from around the world to it, to all kinds of it, to our cultural practices, to our aina, to our history, to our genealogies. They are drawn to it, I believe. This is the world according to Hoku. I believe more than any one single culture that I can think of, that the world is drawn to it. And so what is this ʻIke Hawaii? This is who we are. It is what makes us as Hawaii. Unfortunately, not all Hawaii understand or know ʻIke Hawaii. And so that is part of what we strive to do. Okay, you other two guys, you have anything you want to throw in?
I'll tag in on that last part, Auntie, you know, and I'm actually going to, this is not a mana'o that, or a thought that came from me. I'm going to credit my source. This is actually from another revered cultural practitioner, Dr. Kalei Nu'uhiwa, as she had shared at one time that there's a difference between mana'o and ʻIke. And so this topic that you brought up around what is ʻIke or what is ʻIke Hawaii, and to Hoku's point of, you know, not every Hawaii, not every Native person may have that lens. Some people call it a kuana ʻIke, a perspective, or, you know, now in other spaces, an oiwi lens, an indigenous lens. And at the same time, we may have some non-Hawaii that have really learned and understand and have developed a kuana ʻIke. And where I'm getting at is, you know, folks can have mana'o. And to Rosie, this earlier, she had talked about in the very first series that you folks had, it was when researchers research about us. Got plenty mana'o, right? They in theory, they can go and say things about our practices. And what makes it ʻIke is that you actually are in that hana. And that olelo no ea makahana ka ʻIke. So how do you know when you have ʻIke and you have knowledge and you're able to speak credibly on a source? Is because you've invested in the hana, right? That you've applied yourself with all of your being into that practice. And in Hula, we say that, you know, Hula is life because it's so much more than just the physical movement. And so when we think of what then is ʻIke Hawaii, then it is that the knowledge, initially it'll be at that just acquisition space of, okay, this is what, you know, what I'm learning about. And then essentially we're getting into that real connective space that I am Hawaii and Hawaii is me. That the way in which I care for myself as an individual and is gonna show in my hula or whatever your practice is the reciprocal relationship that you then have with Hawaii. And then so it gives us that sense of kuleana to then advocate for things and to maintain the integrity of such ʻIke, right? So putting that Hawaii part is a descriptive, that we're not talking about the ʻIke of the aina e. We're talking about, as Auntie Hoku says, place-based. This is Hawaii coming from time before, passed down generationally, sometimes, you know, familial, but sometimes also that when you are connected to a source, you know, aka a kumu, right? That you then become the la of that kumu. You become the branch of that kumu. And so then therein lies the reciprocity, that the la gets its source and its nutrients and its this energy to continue to grow from its kumu. And such too with the la, bringing in that energy back into the kumu. So I think when we talk about what is ʻIke Hawaii, it is about an authentic engagement with the content, such in a way that you are not separating yourself from it, but you become it. That you've put in the time to learn it, to respect it, and then as such, you then guard it, right? And then you protect it and you do everything you can because you have kuleana to that ʻIke that has come from your kumu. Okay, well, tap.
So what they said, yes, exactly that. Thank you. I'm just kidding. You know, like ʻIke Hawaii, Hawaiian words are concepts. They're not just one, they don't just have one meaning. And so ʻIke Hawaii, ʻIke would mean knowledge, it can mean awareness, experience, it can mean perception. And Hawaii, as Auntie Hoku pointed out, that ties it to this place and to our people. So all of those knowledge, awareness, perceptions, experiences tied to Hawaii and our people. In my own narrow-mindedness, the knowledge experience that's been passed serially down and across generations for an indeterminate yet vastly long period of time, right? And so some ʻIke, and we had this conversation over text a couple weeks ago amongst our Leo Kāhoa group from Huamakahikina. Some ʻIke might be lineage based, which is master to apprentice or lineage specific. And some may also be general and widely known, right? So lineage specific ʻIke Hawaii might mean that which passed down through an oihana or an ohana for practices like what we do, hula or lua or mele, la'o, lapa'o, or whatever it's going to be. General ʻIke might include knowledge or experiences that are relayed across wide swaths of our community, our districts, our island, or even our archipelago, that have endured here since time immemorial, or which are currently experienced by us and shared as po'e Hawaii. So this general knowledge might also be for things like general fishing knots or farming techniques or hunting or language, those types of things. But whether it's linearly passed or part of the shared community ʻIke, both categories consist of knowledge that is unique to Kanaka Maoli, and that reflect the values of Kanaka Maoli culture and that are actively perpetuated from one generation to the next, because ʻIke does not exist in the vacuum. So behind me is a bookshelf full of Hawaiian books of Hawaiian ʻIke, but what's going to be the difference between me reading this and a non-Hawaiian, not trained in any oihana reading it? The difference is when we are trained the way that we're trained through by our teachers, we also become a part of the foundational knowledge or foundational wisdom that we can now view that knowledge from. That lens that we have stems because we also have a solid foundation in our culture and our values as po'e Hawaii. That's when it becomes wisdom, I think, where we can it's not just data, it becomes actual mana'o that is vai, right? And ʻIke Hawaii is not static either. It doesn't just sit in the book, right? It has a foundation. It's dynamic. It's flexible. It's always, to me, always evolving because we have the right to evolve it. And it's only pa'a only because it's steadfast here and amongst us. So I think the abuses or misuses or appropriation can occur when ʻIke Hawaii is separated from that foundation, or when it's removed from its original context and wielded in manners that the broader community, and especially the masters and practitioners in our community who still honor our foundation, when we don't agree with that. And so the title of this Kiaʻi ʻIke was interesting to me, because when did we turn from kahu, from stewards of our knowledge, to Kiaʻi, to guardians? As kahu, I can be a Kiaʻi, but just because somebody is a Kiaʻi doesn't make them a kahu, right? So I can advocate because I empathize or sympathize as a Kiaʻi, but doesn't necessarily make me a kahu, right? A steward and a guardian. And so it's very interesting that the word Kiaʻi was brought into this context, because as kahu, we are now also having to Kiaʻi, and that's what we worked on when it came to the Huamakahikina Declaration.
Yeah, and as we think about the idea of misuse or misappropriation, I believe part of that occurs because as Hawaiians, we in essence often give freely. When we teach our students, we give them freely. What we want to give and when we want to give is our choice. But we share what we have with our students. And, unfortunately, misuse and misappropriation comes from what Puel said, that there is no cultural connection or foundation or taproot or whatever word you want to use. They see a video, I can do that. They read the book, I know how to do that. Or they try, whoever they is, by the way, they try and make it palatable to more people. Yeah, palatable. Like, hula is kind of hard. When you go to hula, it's really hard. Your legs hurt, your feet hurt, you cannot breathe, you're sweating. Okay, so let's just make it a little easier and a little more palatable for people. So we're going to forget all the hard stuff and we're just going to make fluffy things. Yeah, no. Those sometimes what I see is the misappropriation is to have it be more palatable to the general population and we see it all the time in art and in music and in hula and in all of a sudden we're trying to make it sound like this over here in Germany and this over here in Canada and sound like this over here in another part of the world. But it is not. It's misappropriated for what hula is or what any cultural practice is here at home. When we did and I'm going to tag team you, Tati, in a minute. When we did Ka'ahula o Halawa Ola and we went throughout the world to teach some of the opening hula at workshops, we found that the further you got away from Hawaii, the further you got away from actually seeing hula. And something else was occurring because they were not still connected to hula and connected to Hawaii through hula. So the connection back to Hawaii is absolutely critical so that misappropriation and misuse does not happen as often. Tati?
I'm not sure what to add more to this the question, right? Of have we answered the question of ʻIke Hawaii and part of the abuse of it? As Auntie was talking, it made me think of this idea of we're kind of in this, we've been reared in this idea of this culture of nice, right? To be olu olu, to be, what is aloha. And I think now in contemporary times, and really not so contemporary because the term aloha aina is from even prior to kaho'olawe, right? Mm-hmm. So, yet in today's time, now we have this connection that folks are starting to see it because of social media and because of apparel. You see aloha aina in t-shirts, et cetera, et cetera. And so aloha, we know, is much more than just the pleasantry of, being kind and compassionate, et cetera. It's, that deeper rooted of when you have a connection to Hawaii to its practices, to its people, then you kind of coming back to, then you know the kuleana of what you need to then Kiaʻi. And mahalo puel for, bringing that to, because that's another, sort of the buzz at the moment is Kiaʻi, everything, which I think is important, but we also need to be mindful of from what perspective are we using that term too, right? Which I think is what Puel was sharing, is that as kumu or as kahu, right, your relationship with that ʻIke differs from the Kiaʻi, and so even having all of us be mindful of our journey and our own learning of the ʻIke over time, it will evolve depending on the situation of our generations, right? So there are things that we need to preserve, and there are things that we need to reevaluate. Nobody would have thought that we would have been teaching virtually. That was like, you do not teach via video for many, and some were very kupa'a in that. And I know I might be jumping the gun about how we came to be as Huamakahikina, but it started off with, so do we just stop? Do we just throw our hands up in the air and say, you win, COVID? Or do we say, ole, we are innovative, creative people, and we are going to ho'omau, we are resilient, and we know as kumu that we can, because hula is much more than the physical aspect, that it taps into your spirituality, it taps into your health and wellness, then we shift our role and we become that source for the lahui, be it your immediate family, your halau hula, or the larger community. So I think that's part of, when you talk about ʻIke Hawaii and the abuse, that we have almost desensitized certain words or misused terms, that have come down, and now it's time for us to step back and say, well, let's look at it with an Indigenous lens of what is that word really meaning, right? What does ʻIke actually mean? If we went back to prior to 1778, we wouldn't call it ʻIke Hawaii. It's ʻIke, because everybody had that understanding of what ʻIke is and was and how it came to be. Now today, we need to call it ʻIke Hawaii, because we are still learning and growing and transforming as a people. And so in that transformation, we are also, exploring all parts of the culture, and also creating new consciousness and awareness, while at the same time needing to be mindful of what do you guard and what do you protect, so that the lahui is ready for it, so that we can all anu'u together.
When the abuses that we talked about happen, oftentimes the abuser doesn't know they're abusing it. And it is because books like this, videos on YouTube, are available to the public. And when they don't have the foundation of values and culture and loina and lavena that we do, then obviously they're going to present it through their own screen. And so you have videos of these astral projection practitioners chanting the word ho'oponopono, and they think that it's great because they approach the subject from their banana patch spot, which is, and they don't know they're abusing it, right? But the difference is when we tell them you're abusing it, how they react is what some of the challenges that we have. Then the whole copyright issues, intellectual property rights, and those types of things can come into play. And so our fluidity as practitioners who are doing these types of things, we have strength in our pilina amongst ourselves and in our abilities to articulate in their language in a way that they can understand, because we can communicate both ways, whereas they can only communicate in one way, right? And so there is a small threat to them or you know, to their egos in that. But we have that fluidity, and that kuleana is heavy upon us, and that's what we try to do as Kiaʻi and as kahu of this type of ʻIke, so as to try to avoid misappropriation or abuses. When they enter my school, they're there for a number of years because I'm laying the foundations for them, so that when they get to a certain level, when I say something, they'll be able to view it in a way that I viewed it, which is the way that my teachers viewed it, in the way that their teachers viewed it, and we can continue in that.
I wonder if we could move the discussion to talk about how it is that the kumu hula felt the need to gather and to make a statement, a declaration in the Huamakahikina. If you could explain what was the urgency, obviously, that brought you together to work on this declaration?
Well, I'll get started, and then the others can fill in where I forget the pukas. It really started originally with a call from Kumuhula Mehanahain to a bunch of Kumuhula to come together because of our worry of the health and welfare of our community. So that call turned out into developing Lahui Kanaka. And Lahui Kanaka was ceremonies and practices and chants and behaviors that were brought to bear for us as Kumuhula to also disseminate to our halau and our halau families. And then it went beyond that. And it was basically to provide health, not only spiritually through the chants and ceremonies that we were doing, but also encouraging health through what we eat, water we drink, where we go, and all of those, what we think, and all of those things. And we first came together because of Lahui Kanaka. And then once several months of Lahui Kanaka occurred, we felt kind of settled that we have this Lahui Kanaka we can return to every time we need to ho'ola, yeah, to bring health back into ourselves and our ohana, including halau. We began to think, what else needs healing? What else do we have to think about that we need to look at for the welfare of hula? And thus then the conversations began for this particular document. Okay, so now I'm going to tag team whoever like talk.
It also was possible because of our shared values, our collective shared values, not only as Hawaii, but as hula practitioners, right? Very specific. And because we have this shared understanding, that already kind of leveled the field that we were all standing on and gave us a very firm foundation onto which to build these, what became the articles of the declaration. And I see in the attendees, Sharday Friedis, and at the time she was with OHA, and she, like I said, we can articulate between our culture and to them, whoever the thems are, but that's only half true, because we had to assemble a strategy support team, which was 1 kumuhula, 1 strategist, and 6 lawyers, right? To make sure, and these lawyers specialize in intellectual property rights, Native Hawaiian law, and legislation, or policy making. And so what we gave them, our collective statement based upon our shared values, and then the strategy support team, Sharday included, was able to even translate it further into the legalese that will have teeth in the arenas where it needs to have teeth from. And so we, again, our strength lies in our pilina as a community and through the shared values that we all kind of agree upon. Tati?
And know that it was a gathering of kumuhula from across lineages, and it really started off with, a kahea that went out on social media and spread via just the Coconut Wireless Network, right? Like if you see so-and-so, or if you're wondering why so-and-so is not on and you know that so-and-so, then please, invite them. Every attempt was made for it to be inclusive. And this is going all the way to the very beginnings with Lahui Kanaka, right? That, and we jokingly would call it, this is our support group. We would log on every Sunday at 1:00, not know who would show up. And there were like 60 strong that would come and talk about like, so are you guys teaching? Or what are we doing? Like how, this is what I'm having to deal with, or I'm not tech savvy, or, like I'm worried about how long this pandemic is going to last. So we even invited folks like doctors in the community to come, like Native Hawaiian doctors, to come and talk to us as kumu, just so then, because we know that a lot of our ohana, they trust us because we are literally family, right? When we would say, when kumu says, yeah, or kumu said we need to this, right? That we could encourage our families, which would then encourage the rest of the family, and set up those palama, right? Set up those boundaries and use Oiwi terms, aside from stay in your bubble, to draw upon the pule ho'ola that we know we can access to encourage folks to look at the various foods and getting out into the sun. Kala ika mauliola, right? There's reasons why we have that olelo no eau, and then how we knew that would combat the virus itself. And so going back to that, it was inclusive, like it was really Coconut Wireless, and then kind of going, well, it became a space for people to just share their concerns. And then we realized, wow, people are still coming, and we need to do something. So we put out a survey. What is it that you feel that we need to be talking about as Hula people? What is it? And we tried to also send it out to folks who weren't coming to those meetings that we knew of. And we said, so-and-so, or you are in good relations with so-and-so, can you reach out? And some folks said, you know what? This is not for me. I'm good with, we're okay. Or, let us know what the fruits of your labor end up being, and then we'll decide. And we get it, because this is time consuming. Believe me, we all know we are shouldering this work, and it's all for aloha, because we have that aloha for our for hula. And so through that survey, we started to look at, well, what are the themes and the patterns, and what can we start to take action upon? And so our saying was no kako na kako, like this is for us by us. And that, really, if we don't, then who? And I know these are terms that, kind of get used all over, but, earlier when they said, are we going to wait for others to tell us what to do, or wait for them, whoever the them is, to convene us? Or do we just convene ourselves? And do we just create time and space, in a non-judgmental way? Now, I'll say that in the way that the only thing that needed to be required is that you are able to articulate through whom you became a kumu. Because that kind of goes back to maybe what's at risk, is that if you're not able to say this is through whom, and that, others can affirm, because we know that every halau has their own maybe practice on how to bring up the next generation of kumu hula. Some have uniki ailolo, some it's through family, some, and everything in between, right? So we are not here to say, oh, this is how you're supposed to do you, but you should at least be able to say, this is through whom I have come into this kuleana, really is what it is. It's dare I say it's kuleana and kulana, but I think in today's time, we think of kulana as positionality, as sort of, top down sort of thing. But with that kulana comes kuleana, right? With the kulana of kumu comes the kuleana. And I think we're circling back to our earlier conversation of, if you do not have a source that's going to check you and you get checked with, and you have accountability to that ʻIke, and you can see that, yes, this is their style and this is, I know that's where they come from, then, you know, we have to be, you know, a little concerned about that. And so that's how the convention came about, right? And Pueo had said, you know, we talk about iulu no kalala iki kumu, and, you know, thinking even of some of our kanai nai for laka, and that's the kupu kalala Huamakahikina line came from that, right? That, yeah, the branches will sprout to bear the fruit that is necessary. Yet again, why wait for somebody else to convene us? Let us declare, this is what we are noticing. And through that process, we spent times breakout, we did our best to do breakout, honoring everybody's Leo. Has anybody gotten like 200 something kumu together? Like in any line, right? Like even if you had a convention of whatever, doctors, etc., like people are gonna come with their own perspectives and their trains of thoughts, but that's also healthy, because then you know that they're wanting to come and have the conversation, and they're wanting to share and give the rationale and wrestle it out. And that's what keeps the momentum going. I'm gonna throw it to Pueo, because I hear Pueo when he talks about, like, you know, the whole who comes to the convention thing.
And also it took many months to get there. It
So
took many months. The process, it seemed kind of short, because, you know, in a few months' time, we're heading towards a convention. But it took many months to organize, and like Tatiana said, we got together often. Every week we were getting together in order to discuss these thoughts that were coming up from the Hula themselves, what was on the survey, and what seemed to be bubbling up for everyone. So it took us a while to evaluate, and then to move forward with what were some of those themes, like Tatiana was saying. What were some of those themes that were bothering Kumuhula that were responding to our meetings?
The term that comes up in my mind is herding cats. And that was what it was like, getting these kumuhula together. But we did it. We did it a month prior to, after all the drafts that we went through, all the emails, all the surveys. I don't know how many we did, up to our eyeballs. A month before we stopped the process, and then we put together this draft, and then we sent it to all of the to the strategy support team, who 1 week before the convention came up with a draft that was reflective of our values, but in the terms that policymakers will understand. We sent that draft to all of the participants, the registrants for the convention 1 week prior, so that they could make their notes. And then when it came time for the plenary sessions, where we read each paragraph or sentence or paragraph line by line, we had a vote on every single line. And then there were note takers who, whatever notes were in the chat or comments being brought in, they took notes. Then we broke into these breakout sessions, and everybody had their assignments to work on these different topics that were brought up or issues brought up. That came at the end of the first day, came back. We went over another draft. The strategy support team worked overnight. The next day we did another plenary session, read it again, got more feedback, and then at the end of the second day, after our workshops and things like that, the end of the second day, we came back, and then the final draft was unanimously ratified by all participants.
So it was lots of people working very hard.
And as the Leo Kāhoa, we had to do it sober. And so that was excruciating. Everybody, I know at home they were drinking.
So, you know, like I said, it was many weeks, many months, and yet it was quick. You know, when you think about how impressive this document is. Yeah, Tati?
I think too, part of the process was acknowledging what was going to be the hua, right? What was going to be the outcome, where we said, one, we are going to declare for ourselves. That was one. And that this is in the form of this declaration, right? That was definitely hua number one. Like, this is going to be the outcome of this convening. This is why we are coming together. And even us calling it a convention and not a conference was intentional, because this wasn't for us to come and learn from each other. This, and, Sharon Oli or Hula, etc., which some folks were interested in, don't get me wrong, right? That they're like, oh, I want to learn from so-and-so. But really, we were saying that this is a time for us to have conversations that you wouldn't typically be able to have outside in other spheres. This is not for the hula enthusiasts. Even the support people that we brought in, we actually had a meeting with them to remind them of their role and to remind them that what they are privileged to hear and listen in on remains there. It is not for them to go outside into their own networks and friend circles and talk about like, oh, I was in a meeting with kumu so-and-so and so-and-so, and they were talking about this, or even to the positive, right? Like, oh my gosh, I just loved it. I heard that, because it goes both ways. Because why? We wanted to maintain that safe space. We wanted to maintain the intellectual property space, right? Like the integrity, because here we are talking about integrity, then the process needed to be in that way too. And so the other topic, so yes, the declaration is one. Yes, we went line by line. And then we even had breakout rooms like, okay, talk, share your mana'o, add. If you're gonna say, I don't know about that line, then give us something. Right? Then give us the rationale for, or say, this is what I think should be changed, because we have to be comfortable with sharing, and this is why, right? And while that was happening, and our strategy support team was behind the scenes, bless them, and the magic that they were able to work through the nights and through the hours of just, looking at every period and making sure this all lined up, and just terminology, and did we honor all of the mana'o that came through the 40 something rooms that were open by, small groups of kumu. During that time, kumu, we had these little breakout sessions around topics that kumu were interested in learning about, because, I grew up with my mom as a kumu hula, and she herself would say, things have changed. Now, before, registration used to just be, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm interested in coming to you. Oh yeah, come check us out. Or where do you live? Maybe you should go on that side of the island. I mean, it was like that, and they show up, and that was it. Today, we need to have waivers. We need to have insurance. During the time of the Zoom, my insurance person says, oh, you need to consider media insurance, or, those kinds of things to protect. I mean, you wouldn't even think that you got to do it. And we actually got to ask ourselves, like, do we really need to do this? But then in this day and age, we do, because who is to say that so-and-so is just going to pick it up and take it from you and then say, oh yeah, well, it's mine. And now I am whatever I am. You hear the stories of, oh yeah, my kumu used to be so strict and this and that, and now it's like, don't touch me, like, and it's so that's not Hawaii. At the same time, for us as kumu, we know that, all right, this is why we maintain those very strict boundaries and that kahua in our halau. So then that way, when we see and like Puesa, they stay with us over the years, then they know there's the reason why kumu had to set those boundaries, right? Because really, I was doing that to protect all of us. Mm-hmm. And those that aren't able to understand that, then they naturally weed themselves out. Or we have that conversation, I don't think this is the right fit for you. So I'm using that as an example of one of the topics that, we had breakout rooms around on what are some of the things that we need to be mindful in the business side, because there's some kumu hula or other arts people that this is their livelihood, right? And aloha does not put food on the table. So, how do we make sure that we are taking care of our kumu. I see Auntie Hoku, and during the Lahui Kanaka time, you know, we talked about like, and she said, she goes, you know, it dawned on me that my haumana have not checked in, you know, in this week, like, kumu, how you doing? You know, because everybody's taking care of their own and etc. But, you know, how do we reconnect with each other to make sure that we're teaching them? Kumu is giving a lot. Some people charge tuition, but believe you me, tuition is not putting us anywhere, right? It's more so of an accountability thing. But then what is that reciprocal relationship that they are then taking care of their kumu? Because it goes both ways, and being able to create those spaces for kumu to have conversations with other kumu. Puel uses the example of, you know, when you're gonna go to a doctor convention, you gotta be a doctor, and you're gonna talk about doctor kind of things, right? You want to talk about that, Puel?
No, that's Auntie Hoku saying.
What's that Auntie Hoku saying?
Yeah, I usually say I cannot go to the American Medical Association convention because I am not a doctor. I do not qualify to attend the American Medical Association convention. So we were saying there are qualifications to attend the convention. We're not saying if you're a kumu hula or not. That's you, kuleana. But we are saying to do this convention, you needed to be a lineally descended kumu hula, because then we are confident that you understand kuleana, that you understand the greater good, that we are meeting together for the benefit of all. You know, because kumu hula, we're notoriously independent. We don't like people tell us what to do. No, you stay out of my halau and I stay out of your halau, and that's all that's going to be. We are good with that. But when we came together, what was most important is the greater good of hula. And that was the primary thing that we were able to think about. Now, when you look at the list, and maybe you don't see your kumu's name on the list, well, that might be because, number one, they may have been working, or they may have been busy, or they had hula class, or they're not real ma'a with this Zoom video thing, press the button and all of that business. They were off island, they were off continent, who knows? Yeah, so it was those people who were able to join with us for the 2 days and engage in this monumental document that we felt was important to us.
If we could put, I'm intrigued by the section 3 on transmission, and maybe we could show and what I think are really new things. I mean, very critical kind of loina that you're laying down here, that you have, you know, that the kumu have maintained and cared for these practices one generation to the next. Can you scroll down, please? Hula is defined to maintain and transmitted by kumu hula as delineated in this declaration. Any individual who has not been lineally acknowledged as a kumu hula consistent with this declaration is not a kumu hula. I think that's an amazing statement.
Woohoo!
And I was wondering if you could, I think we can take it down, and then wondering if you could talk about how, you know, did everyone accept that? Was it difficult, or was that everybody was very pa'a on that?
Everybody that came was very pa'a on that. Not everybody came that was pa'a. So everyone that came agreed to that statement. If they signed onto this declaration, they agreed to that statement. And we went through that line, put it up on the big screen, read it, asked for a vote in the chat box. People will go aye, a'ole, kanalua. We look, take the count. If there's a'ole or kanalua, We save that, put it on the side into a breakout room for conversation. But I think, was it uncomfortable for many kumu hula? Yes, because many don't think of themselves in such a manner. Well, you want to share something?
Yeah, so again, it's because we have the shared understanding and shared value system that we were able to come up with the definition of how kumu become kumu. And if you read, I don't have my copy open right now, but the way that we defined it is very broad, because I went through Ailolo, but this person went through a luncheon, and that person went through on somebody's deathbed, made them a kumu hula, and this person just said their auntie said, right? And so how do we broaden that definition to include all of that? And then I'm called a kumu hula, but my students don't call me that. Some of them call me uncle, and on Sundays sometimes they call me auntie. But so what is it? Is it teacher? Is it kumu? And so we defined it with the Hawaiian heading, but the footnotes tell you what all else is included in that. And so when it says, if you're not a kumu hula as per this declaration, then you're not a kumu hula. And so that's moving back to where that definition was, how we kind of came to the consensus. And I do see in the list here of several kumu hula who were also part of the convention as well. And then one who was not, I know because her and her mother were busy at the time. But it was as democratic as kumu hula can be. Yeah, we all follow the rules when we get together. So.
And I also wanted to call out that, you know, I know that we are very aware of our critics, right? We are very aware of those who are wondering why, or even why doing it this way, that seems so not Hawaii. And yet I would argue that this is Hawaii. Convening, having the conversation around like Puel has been talking about, because we have this shared understanding of this kuleana, this is very Hawaii, right? And that even being able to say what is and what is not is also super important to ensure the sustainability of this beyond, right? We're not just thinking about us. We are preparing this for what the 4, 5, 6 generations from now will be able to build upon, right? And
we're not the first ones that thought about this. Right. We're not the first ones. Back in the 50s, kumu hula tried to convene and they were worried back then about what was happening with hula.
And we had some folks that were a part of that showed up and said, before, you know, that we've done this, and we so appreciate you folks picking it back up, because it's hard. It's hard, and you also have to be makokau to take on the conversations, and you know, and that's what it is. Let's talk. Yeah, let's come together and let's talk about it.
We also then go, okay, we like this, and what really for me has been the most marvelous outcome of this is that we are talking and integrating with each other like never before. That we have discussed, we can call up on the telephone, we can text, we can email, we can have discussions about with so-and-so and so-and-so that we may never have had an opportunity to do so because we didn't think they cared. And here you see all of these people care. And so now the conversations can continue if that's what folks would like to have happen.
So that pilina, we were able to build new pilina also, because I met people I never met before, and we were now close friends, and that's going to be enduring into the future. Even our students will be able to inherit our relationship through each other. Now, the declaration is great, but it doesn't mean anything if we can't use it or leverage it for the advancement of hula, or to ensure that the bar of quality, the bar of expectation doesn't go any lower than it is now, right? And we have a high bar now, but just to ensure that we don't backslide. And so once the declaration was made public in September of last year, we sent it off to our council members here on Maui, and Council Member Kiaʻi Rollins Fernandez said, "Ooh, let me take this up and see if we can get a resolution drawn up and then adopted by the county council." And so in November of last year, the Maui County Council adopted the Huamakahikina Declaration on the Integrity, Stewardship, and Protection of Hula. And in doing so, they opened the door for several things that we are now running with. It's my heart's palpitating. And then Hawaii Council was also in April also able to get a resolution, the same resolution put into their county's words, and then passed unanimously by their council. And at the end of April, the Senate Concurrent Resolution 121 was adopted by the state. And it says that it encourages they didn't adopt the declaration, but the resolution encourages the state and the counties to work with Huamakahikina and kumu hula for the protection of hula. And what that means is some kumu hula are not part of Huamakahikina or don't participate in our activities for whatever reasons. It's not that there's a closed door or anything like that, but they just we haven't aligned together, which is completely fine. Kumu hula is a kumu hula. And so although that is Maikai, it would have been great if they adopted the declaration itself, but they haven't. We've also sent letters, actually just sent a letter off to the UN, to the World Intellectual Property Organization, hopefully so that they can also recognize the declaration as our statement, as our kumu hula statement on hula, and that would do several things, such as open us up to certain grants, UN funded grants, and might give us more teeth in other arenas. With that said, we call upon in our call to action for the state and counties to resource hula to the fullest extent possible. And so I see that there's 42 people watching now. We are able in Maui County now to run with the project called the Halau of OEV Art, which will be the first county-funded full facility designed by kumu hula for hula, as well as for the OEV arts that for which hula serves as the nexus. And so when I say we're running, we are running. Like we have, they tell us how slow the county is, but they told us this the end of last year, and we have been working nonstop trying to get this passed. So the first reading of the budget is this coming Thursday, where we're asking from the county, $43 million, that if they give that, Senator Schatz pledged $11 million in matching funds from the federal government as well, so we can get this built in one phase, and we're hoping that comes true. But it's all because of our pilina, our common foundation and value sets that allowed us to create the declaration and then push the declaration forward.
Yeah. And with that, we want to let everybody know that that's only one site. We're telling the county, we're telling the state, we're telling everybody, it's just one site. In our county, we're telling them we want a hula center in every community. In every community, not only the one in Wailuku, but in every community, because every community deserves to have a place in its neighborhood.
And reflect that neighborhood's needs and values, or that the community there's needs and values. So when we met with the Big Island kumu hula after that they passed their resolution, we met with the Big Island kumu hula and said this was our Escalade version of the wish list based on our needs, but what do you folks need? What do you even want? And so after Auntie Hoko and I gave the spiel, Auntie Pua said, okay, let's talk about what we actually want. And so they're now running with that as well. It will reflect our needs as Maui Maui and Maui Nui hula practitioners, whether it's in Kaunakakai or Lanai City or Lahaina. It's going to reflect what we need.
Oh, yeah, I think when the power of the kumu hula is amazing. It's awesome because we saw when there was that effort to take away our access rights and the kumu hula came together and they had the pahu for 24 hours, that resolution was withdrawn. And you can see that power when you first get together. I wanted to also ask you about number 5, misuse of hula. It seems, I wondered if you folks had any issues that have arisen because of this. So you folks oppose the intentional and unintentional misuse, misrepresentation, exploitation, or abuse of hula in any form, and then object to and oppose intentional, unintentional appropriation, misappropriation, including choreography, designs, proper names, lexicons, and across various mediums by which their hula is captured, including but not limited to photo, video, sound recording, printed media, digital media, and the like. And that if it's not presented by or permission of kumu hula or does not otherwise conform to the letter intent of this declaration, is not and should not be labeled as hula or otherwise presented as the indigenous dance of Hawaii. Okay, can put it down. I was wondering, I think, like Disney and, all these different movies or television.
More than that, it has to do simply with they have a commercial on TV that says, come to Hawaii and see hula, and you're looking at Tahitian. And you're looking at Tahitian. Come to Hawaii and be with us and hula, and you're looking at Tahitian. Misrepresentation in all kinds of forms.
Including, come and learn hula in this one day. You're simplifying the entire practice of hula, saying that you can learn hula in one day, or you see these lope dancing, and they're representing now us. They are lowering the expectation of what people view Hawaii as, kumu hula as, and hula as. And so we want to make sure that if you as the Lahaina Cannery Mall or whatever shopping center you are promoting hula, that you have hula founded from a kumu hula and you are representing hula accordingly.
Even anyone who puts on luau shows, we don't care who teaches your Tahitian or your Maori or your Samoan, but if you're going to have hula being danced, you hire a kumu hula to teach hula there, and not have some girl that would learn hula when she was 12 to come and teach hula to the rest of the girls in the line. That is unacceptable.
As long as the kumu hula is in control, so the kumu hula can send an alaka'i to teach.
Oh yes.
As long as it's under the direction of a kumu hula, that's kind of how we get around that.
So you see,
go ahead.
So you see, it's much more than just, we want resources, because I think some folks may think like, that's what it's about. It's, resourcing in that space, but it's not just the resources. It's everything, right? That everything that is representing hula should truly be hula. Now, who has the authority to authenticate what is truly hula? It is a kumu hula. So if you are going to say this is Hawaii, we need to be asking ourselves, in what way is this Hawaii? Again, circling back to your ʻIke Hawaii question, how do you know that that's ʻIke Hawaii? Who is your source to then be able to affirm that that is? Now, I want to recognize that there are companies with, around our Pai'aina that are being conscious of this, hiring cultural advisors and the like. And I think, we have folks who are, being hired as language specialists, design specialists. Some of the work that I'm doing in my day job is largely based on providing that kahua of that kuana, developing kuana ʻIke Hawaii in different industries. And so when it comes to hula, we need to make sure that what we are seeing is authentic. What we are seeing is truly hula, because it has strain. And Tuhoku talks about the farther away you go from Hawaii, and you see it in it's not just one organization, and to some degree it's ours too, right? We have to own that that's part of our own history, right? And we don't need to go down that path right now, for that moment in time, that's what it was. But we also knew, we now can see what the cost was when we went down that path. Okay, so do we just say, oh well, or do we start to say, no, we want to acknowledge, let's reel it back in. We want to acknowledge that, okay, at that time, generations ago, they may not have seen the long impact of what was to come, but now we are living that. So we are wanting to say, no more, this is what it is, and we need to be the ones that are at the forefront. So whether it's in the private or the commercial spheres, whether it is the tourist industry or educational spaces, because even some of the programs that we see throughout the Pai'aina, May Day programs, etc., it's multicultural. Mai ka'i, now let's make sure that the hula part is truly under the guidance, as Puel said. It could be their alaka'i, but then that person got permission because it's a respect. It's acknowledging, kumu, may I do this? Absolutely. And then there's that, because it's a reciprocal relationship, right? A'oakua omai, because of that kuleana, I acknowledge that I'm here because my kumu is allowing me to do such. And then when bringing in a kumu hula into the spaces, then make sure you resource that kumu appropriately, because aloha does not put food on the table. And oftentimes that's the last thing. Or we're gonna give you a lei, or we mahalo. Now, don't get me wrong; those are all
me lunch.
Right, those are all, we appreciate those gestures, and at least that is something at mind. But that should be one of the top things, to the point of kumu hula. The kulana of kumu hula is equal to a PhD, an EDD, a doctorate. And so would you say, oh, okay, time and time and time again to come for aloha? Now, if you know that you are going to constantly tap that source, what are you doing to ensure the sustainability of that source as well? Right? Now, if it's a one-time, just, oh, it happened to be, now that's a little different. Then you figure out what honorarium or what lunch package or, nice something you can give the kumu. But if you know that you are going to constantly come back, then we need to be setting that standard of, then you make sure you plan for that and you resource it and you fund it. And that way you're honoring the ʻIke that now that kumu is bringing into that space, be it your elementary through high school program, or be it your hotel lu'au, or be it your the airport greeters, or whatever, or even in the private sector, hiring. When you're going to hire kumu hula based on all the ʻIke that you bring, then you pay them same, because there are certain groups that if you do not have a degree, I'm sorry, we can only keep you at this level of pay, but we're going to tap you for the full extent of the ʻIke that you have, without giving you the equal pay that it deserves.
Have you had success in, kalamai?
No, go ahead, Daviana.
I was wondering if you've had success in cooperation from the various entities that are, engaging
well,
in hula.
We're just starting because, here we are, the end of May, almost June. And all of this has happened in the course of a year and a half, if even. Last year was our convention 10 months ago. All of this has happened in the course of that time. So we've been working through politics, through the government. We're now viewing or focusing on perhaps the visitor industry will be our next place we go. But education, hang on to your hat, because we're going to be coming to you as well with this commensurate idea. And thus, why Huamakahikina says a lineally descended kumu hula, because of that. one thing I wanted to bring up that when we were talking about luau shows and all of that is, okay, this is going to make people really uncomfortable. Yay, we like that. See, we like that.
That's how we grow, right? We grow from that uncomfortable space.
Yeah, and that is competition. Hula competition. What are we going to say about hula competitions? I am fortunate that I oversee 2 hula competitions here on Maui, and we have declared that only lineally descended kumu hula will have first preference in joining this competition. If you're not lineally descendant, you wait in line and maybe we let you in. This year, next year, it will be only lineally descended kumu hula can compete in our competition. So the question is, oh, you think people not going to come? We don't care. We don't care, because what is more important is not that people won't come, but that hula will be represented and put forward in the best way possible by kumu hula. So are we going in other places? Yes, but give us a little bit of time.
I have about 10 more minutes. There's some questions. One is, are there aspirations to have future conventions to add new items to the declaration as a singular living document?
Yes, we are having our second convention coming up in August, and it will be virtual again, like we did the first one, bringing well, we'll send out information ahead of time, but bringing any additional thoughts about the declaration will be part of the convention itself. So yes, we intend for it to be a living and an evolving document as well.
And then as far as the convening, right? So we wanted to bring it back, right? So that folks know, okay, this is the hua of this declaration. This is the effort, also empower other kumu hula to how can they then use the declaration in their spaces as well. And then, thinking of, do we need, what's the cadence of these convenings? Is it every year? Is it, every other year, or, every 5 years? I think those are the kinds of things that we're also thinking about, because we know that given the time and space, people will come, right? We saw that was already a given, 200 plus, coming together virtually. Okay, so then now it's like, all right, how do we make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and our own Mauliola in the behind the scenes work? And how do we set up a system of even bringing others in? We're here as Leo Kāhoa, which is, lack of a better term, like the steering committee, but even the term Leo, right? We are the voice, that Kāhoa Hoa, that kind of call and response. So we are not here just on ourselves, but it's on behalf of the larger group. And so that are some of the things that we know that we need to be having conversations around on what is our cadence, how often do we convene, is it in response, or should we continue to be more proactive, right? Because I think there is different benefits to both, right? Like, do we just be reactive to when something comes up, or do we be proactive so that way it doesn't even get there? Right. And this is, we have sort of started already on that path of proactive convention.
Totally. And just another acknowledgement, along with the Huamakahikina members that I mentioned before, also in the chat, or excuse me, in the audience is a Leo Kāhoa member, Sherry Lawa Eyamasaki. And so I know she's shaking her head saying, we want this every 5 years.
Aloha, mahalo for joining the conversation.
So I see in the chat that someone is asking about can it be adopted or applied to other culturally significant practices of knowledge? That absolutely. We offer this declaration to any other culture, group, thought, practice, whatever kind of words you want to use, but we will not convene for them. If the La'aulapa'au people want to talk story and figure out that for them, super. The Ho'oponopono people want to do that, super. If other culture, if the Lauhala weavers want to do that, super. Our documents, our process, we are open to sharing that with anyone who would like to talk story, but we will not convene for them. We
Yes.
convene for Hula.
One thing though that we encourage is what we kind of did with the Pauakalani Declaration was kind of the big sister or big brother to the Huamakahikina Declaration. And so we were able to echo some of the values and even lines and mana'o from the Pauakalani Declaration in the Huamakahikina Declaration, because that will give them both collective power together. We also, in the footnotes and in the declaration itself, the main body and the footnotes, called out other practices and made them kind of broad, so that if any practice deals with natural environment, that it's included in our declaration, and then they can include, our reference to them, and we build collectively together. And so we would encourage them to do the same, so that we all can move forth together and be it's easier for us to support one another that way.
Thank you. I'm just so inspired. I can't imagine trying to get some of the people I practice with around together in a room to agree on something like this. So,
well, we didn't meet with wine. That happened after.
Well, we have a few minutes left. Would you like to just give some, maybe for you, what this declaration means personally, and how can we, what kind of support would you like to see from the general public who's listening today?
I'll start with this, what kind of support. I think if we can everyone in the general public realize that there has been misuse and misappropriation of many things Hawaiian, and that we must not be a part of that. We must not feed into that. We must not think it's okay. We cannot laugh at that. We cannot pass it on our Facebook and places as being an acceptable thing. We only ask that this might raise people's awareness of Hawaiian things deserve to be seen, done, and presented in a Hawaiian way. And so what we would hope is that kind of support for Hula and all OEV arts, not only Hula, but all OEV arts. And then let those arts decide how they want to move forward.
There are more dog parks on Maui, county-funded dog parks on Maui, than there are hula facilities, county-funded hula facilities. The same for pickleball, the same for skateboarding, for swimming, for anything else that is not a tangible and intangible cultural heritage of the Hawaiian people. They organize, they get county funding, and they get facilities. So if we can do this, as soon as other cultural practitioners band together and make their needs be known and organize in that way, we look forward to seeing facilities for all of us.
Aheleo vale no we, he mana koka leo, yeah. We are in these spaces because we are using our leo. And for some, we have been maybe thought to hamau kaleo, right? That no, you don't go into those spaces. This is something I've never thought that I would be involved in. And yet at the same time, one of the efforts of this declaration is also creating that awareness and empowering us to use our leo. You know, the word declare, to declare is stating it, and we have that in our mele and our oli. Aheleo wale noe. You know, that's once we speak it, it will come through. So let's be intentional in what we're doing. So that's what I would love for the general public to know. Call out that intention. Be focused on what is the aim that you're going for. You can call it different things. Your hua, your desired result, your loa'a. I think of Uncle Jerry Konanui when he kanu, right? He said, you look at the huli and he said, you will give me big kalo. Yeah, and you got to put that out there. And so as we are using this declaration as a way to communicate in others' language, know that it is very much so grounded in Hawaii. It is very much so from a Kuana ʻIke Hawaii. It is very much so grounded in our practice, for us by us, right? No kako, na kako. And so that's what I would hope for, is that we are empowering each other to use our leo. And at the same time, we welcome the conversation. We welcome folks to come and talk story. So then that way we can continue to build that shared understanding and or hear what the other side has to say, and then be able to share. And this is let me offer you something back in this conversation as well. So mahalo nui for this platform and really, you know, bringing it back to Hawaii. And I'm really excited as to what my keikis keiki are going to be able to reap the benefits and be able to use their leo, because we've already set them up in that way and lay that down as a foundation.
Sorry, cannot hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I want to mahalo each and every one of you for all the work that you put into this convening and the dedication, and, you know, bringing in your own lineage and your own training to share with your fellow kumu hula, and making all of us in Hawaii aware of how important and central hula is, and that we need to provide that respect to our ancestors who are the source of this knowledge and this practice. We do want to show a slide where, if you're interested in getting to see a recording of this and other recordings, this is where you could go at sciencesandthesacred.com. And we had at one point we had 50 people -7, so 43 participants. We thank everyone who joined us this evening for this beautiful, wonderful, full of knowledge presentation. Thank you, panelists, so very much. And aloha and malama pono, and may everybody, you know, good health and well-being for everybody, and na'akua pu. Mahalo and aloha.
Mahalo nui.
Ahui ho.